Hello, everybody. I'm here with Millsy from Hometown Commander. How are you today, Millsy?
I'm doing good, man. How are you? My name is Millsy. I am the head brewer over at Hometown Commander, where I try to brew 4 to 5 Commander decks a week. It's a lot, but I am screaming down the path of trying to out-brew the Magic world, and I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job at it as of late.
It's pretty great. You've been more than me lately.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where when I first went back to start the channel, I was like, what is the one thing in Magic I like to do the most? And at the time, I had friends to play with, right? But you only get to sit down to play Commander maybe once a week, right? If you have a chance. And I was like, what can I do to keep my love for the game there and keep my wheels turning? And I said, well, when I brew decks, it's something I enjoy to do for myself. Why not trying to do it for content? And I think my videos now are a whole lot better than they were back then, but it taught me a lot. I've got to brew a lot of decks that I probably never would have played for myself, and I think that's the thing I enjoy the most for the channel, is getting to brew a deck that maybe I wouldn't choose to play for myself, but still getting to learn.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I'm similar. I think you're doing Commander, right? Commander decks,
Yeah,
and I guess Hometown Commander, right? So Commander
yeah.
decks. Yeah, I was gonna
I
say
try
I
to keep
do
myself on a
like the.
I try to keep myself on a fairly standard budget, right? I know at the end of the day that not everybody wants to spend $600 on a commander deck or 800 or whatever. So I try to keep my decks between 150 and $300 because I feel like even to some people that might be too much, but to most people
Yeah.
that's a fairly standard range for a deck. It still gives you a lot of synergy with having some pricey cards without having to use just all cheap bottom bin cards. You still get the synergies, you still get the fun staples, but you may not get the flashy stuff, right? But the goal is to try to make every deck be as synergistic as I can, still feel good at a table. And I'll be honest, only a few I can count on one hand times I've ever brewed a deck where I wouldn't be willing to play it myself. And that's kind of always been my, I guess, proof of concept for myself. Would I actually take this and put it on a table and try it? And if it's not, then the video doesn't go out.
Yeah, that's pretty fun. I guess I'm a little bit the same with the popper decks I do. I was cranking out those for a while, and then I got really busy, so it's been a minute. But I'm very impressed with you with doing, 4 or 5 decks a week. That's insane.
It's a lot of time spent staring at Moxfield, and I feel like the other brewers out there will know exactly what I mean. But you know what? It's one of those things where I think it took me a few months to get comfortable, right? To get that confidence to know that, well, number one, I could actually make some decent decks. It's different, right? I'm a very aggressive to mid-range player, so I've kind of always gotten away early on in my Magic career with playing the mono green stompy decks of the world, right? And things like that. The decks that reward you for wanting to play that mid-range style. But it wasn't until I started brewing, is it spells and more combo-based decks and things that require more of a game plan than just I play big creature and turn it sideways. You know what I mean? And so over the last year, I've learned a lot about what does a reanimator deck look like? What does an aristocrat deck look like? How do you functionally make these decks work across different commanders and not just have it be, aristocrats dot deck every time you put a deck together, right? Because I think the one beauty of the commander format is that every commander is different. Two may look the same, but they may be just enough different that a list can look completely different, right? And so the fun is kind of figuring out where those dials are, right? And getting to turn them and figure out what's the best for that deck. And then, right, we as brewers love to set challenges on ourselves. What if I can make this just only have cats in it? Or what if I can make this only be swords, right? We have all of these fun things that we get to do for ourselves. And so sometimes I'll try my best to say, oh, X might be the best commander in this archetype, but I'm going to take this one, which is a couple down, and make it into that deck and try my best to push it forward, and not just take, oh, this is the best in the archetype, so this is what we're brewing. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think it promotes not only my goal to learn more of every deck that I brew, but have fun at the same time and not just feel like I'm cranking out the same deck twice a month,
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what I really like about it. With Commander and uh, I guess to an extent Popper, I think the coolest part is that you get to find those, as you put them, like the bottom of the barrel cards You know, and you can, you're talking about getting a higher budget and getting some better cards, but also being able to find those bottom of the barrel cards to be able to build with to make your deck like a little more interesting. Like, okay, this creature might have a higher mana cost with a slightly different payoff that I like more than, you know, this other card. Like all the like demonic tutor, you can find a bunch of other tutors that are like, hey, this does the same thing, but a little more expensive, or there's like a slight catch to it, or just like cards like that that I think are really fascinating that I personally like doing, and I don't know, I think that's the coolest part of Commander.
I always love it when, those 10-cent rares or those dollar box rares get to shine as well. Like I'll give you an example, a card that I've always loved. It's gained a little bit more popularity over the last year or two with how many spell slinging decks have existed, but one of my favorite enchantments for spell slinging decks is Arcane Bombardment. It's an enchantment that says every turn when you cast your first instant or sorcery, you pick one out at random and you exile it, and then you cast all the ones you've exiled so far for free. It's a meme, right? You're trying to
Yeah,
set it up, you're trying to load things into it. And what I love about a card like Arcane Bombardment is there's two ways you can take it. You can try to slam every extra turn spell you can underneath it and just shoo two down the line, or you can try to just put the most weirdest things you want to underneath it. Like, for example, one of my goals in the deck that I first built with it was to put something like Tasha's Hideous Laughter underneath it to just start milling your opponents out every turn as you're doing these other spell sling things, or just find fun spells to try to jam underneath it. Another example was a card from the Lost the Lord of the Rings commander decks, Call Forth the Tempest. It's a big red spell that's a board wipe, but how it works is you cascade twice when you cast it, and then all you deal damage to all your opponent's creatures equal to the mana value of all the other spells you cast this turn. So here's this big meanie 8 mana red sorcery that I'm trying to stuff underneath an Arcane Bombardment just to do wacky things. Like those are the kind of things in Commander I love, that we can do these weird things. Like it was funny that the idea of Bear Force One became so popular, right? Make these mono green bears decks that just make bears really fun in Commander because, right, they're not really very popular or sorry, strong, right? Because they're just two twos for two that may have an ability and may not. But you start to get these commanders like a Eula that could just make them really fun. And like that's what I love about Commander, these decks that just make these off the wall cards into something that can be really good. But you may not think of it if your goal is to just make big green deck, that may not care about
yeah,
these small tutus. And I definitely see Wizards pushing themselves to make more cards like this. As we go through these sets, you start to see these off-the-wall commanders that care about these really niche or weird things, and it dredges all these cards up from from the bottom because they work so well, right, for what these decks want to
yeah.
do. And it's like I can't think of another format where you really get to benefit from that. You really get
Oh
these
yeah,
weird things that make you want to play all this random stuff. I love sitting down to a commander table and someone plays a card and you go, "What is that? What does that do?" Because I've played a lot of commander and I have no idea what that card is.
yeah. Well, it's like was it when Nadu came out? There was that little shinobi hook thing that shot up in price, and then
Yeah.
you get the flubs decks now. You're like, I want to play without my hand, and you're like, what is happening?
Flubs is a meme, man. That's one deck that I released for the channel that I honestly said in the video. I was like, I did my best to attempt to figure out how to build and pilot it. And as someone who doesn't normally play that style, I don't think I did it justice, but I tried my hardest and I still feel like I didn't get there. That's
Yeah,
that's one of those commanders that you just gotta figure out intimately how it works. And once you get there,
yeah,
it's a beauty to watch people play that commander. It's just I haven't been able to figure it out.
yeah, yeah. It's wild. That's fun. Okay, so what are you currently working on, and like what's your goals with your channel, with all these decks you're building?
Also, obviously, I joked at the start, right? I'm trying to outbrew the magic world. I say it in every video, and I mean it. Like I'm trying my best to just be the person who tries to put a stamp on as many things as I can, and I think I'm fulfilling part of it. I want to be someone who encourages people to play the game the way they want to play it. Take that commander and make it work. It doesn't have to be in the top 100, right? Every commander can have a deck, and I try my best to um, brew as many as I can in hopes that it can what's the word I'm looking for? It can inspire people to take their deck and make it the way they want to make it, because I think if there's other commander players out like me, you may look at a deck list and go, I never thought of that card. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that I didn't think of that. And you immediately take and one and put it in another deck. Like that to me is just part of that commander experience, right? And that's what I hope to do. I see a lot of comments from viewers that say, I never would have thought of that card, or I never would have thought of this card, or why don't you try this card? And those are the comments I love because it's like you see people kind of approaching a commander from different angles and trying to find ways to make it the way that they want. I'm only one
Yeah.
guy, so at the end of the day, I can only make a deck from one angle. But it's cool that I get the opportunity to let people either yell at me or telling me they agree with me in the comment section and talk about why that may be. At the end of the day, I find it really funny in a world where we have a resource like EDH Rec that helps us with every commander and understanding what cards are good or bad. I think it's funny that we live in a world that if you put a card that's recommended in EDH Rec, you get yelled at for putting cards that are on the page. But if you don't, you get yelled at for not. And I just think it's kind of funny sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of fickle sometimes.
you
um,
know, and I know people mean well by it in the sense that
yeah.
it's not a matter of I don't think it's malicious all the time. I think it's
Yeah.
sometimes that people get, like I said, everybody has that different viewing angle they're viewing a commander on, and so sometimes it's hard to look at it and go, why don't you have this card? It makes so much sense. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
that's just I love that that's how we all can view the game just a little bit
Yeah.
differently and find our angles for it.
Well, and I feel that way about Sir Conrad, the Black
Yeah,
Knight from Eldraine.
great
I
card.
100% should have that in a couple decks, and I just don't run it because I
Yeah.
find him. There's too much text. I don't want to have to think about it every time it triggers. I personally don't want to play it. It's too
See,
much
I
for
find
my
that
brain.
I find that hilarious because I have friends who are like that. They hate having to track their own triggers. They hate having to, put that dice on top of their deck so they don't forget their upkeep triggers, so they don't forget this or that. And I'm that person who wants to make a small Rube Goldberg machine to figure out how this deck or this archetype can work. And it's just, isn't it hilarious that we can have two different players in this ecosystem and care about completely different things, but we can come to a table and have fun. To me, I think that's
Yeah.
what I just continue to love about Commander is that we all can find these ways to enjoy the game, together.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, you put a note here. How do we play Magic normally? And you're just saying that you don't play Magic normally. You try to brew Rube Goldberg machines.
It's
So
it's great, isn't it? Like, no, I mean, honestly, the most Magic I play is Commander, right? I have a play group of
yeah.
guys around me that I've been able to foster, and we all enjoy playing together. But for us, getting together on a Monday night to play Commander is more of a group therapy session, right? Than it is Commander, right? Getting to do life together and figure things out and distress and all that. But I also have had fun with, well, what do I do for the other 6 days of the week when I want to play Magic and there's nobody around? Arena, right? Everybody loves
Uh,
Arena. No one has anything negative to say about Arena. But,
nothing.
I
Nothing
love
at all.
Brawl and Standard Brawl, or I guess yeah,
Historic
it's
brawl.
Brawl and Historic Brawl now. I apologize, names.
No. Yeah.
But I love those formats because they're like Commander, but you get that beauty of one-on-one play, which we just don't see a ton of in Commander, right?
Mm,
I think it kind of helps hone your skills. In fact, I'll give you a perfect example for my Jetmir Nexus of Rebels deck. It's a Naya tokens deck. It's one of my favorite decks I have. I love it. You get to 9, you get into combat, you get to smash some people. It's a great deck.
mm-hmm.
Well, on Brawl, I was playing with Eska's Chariot, a vehicle that makes a couple cat tokens when it comes in, right? And you crew it and it makes tokens when it attacks. And I played
Yeah.
with it so many times on Brawl, and I was like, why isn't this in my commander deck? This makes so much sense. Why am I not playing this card? And I think it's so cool that for certain commanders, you have the opportunity to see some of these cards differently just by playing the game 1v1 instead of a commander table. And in fact, it
Yeah.
actually ended up changing the way that I approached that deck. I kind of focused more on attack triggers that make tokens to kind of boast that number up and kind of catch your opponents by surprise. And that's fun, right? It kind of changes the way maybe you view your deck that way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I like that. I get confused with arena and reality. Where I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely had this card, and then I dig for it and dig for it and dig for it for an hour, and I'm like, where is this card? Oh, it's an arena. I love that
Why
card. Why
doesn't it
don't I have this
automatically
card?
move when I look at it? Right? Why
Yeah,
isn't it
yeah.
automatically moving? Yeah.
It's funny. Um, yeah, there's a lot of those. There's a lot of those cards too that are on Arena that you're like, I love this, and then you play it in real life and you're like, this is too much. I can't keep track of my own triggers. Um,
And I'm probably one of those weird people that likes alchemy. Now I don't mean alchemy as a format, but I mean like some of the cards that we have from alchemy in historic brawl like are genuinely fun. I have my gripes about some of the commanders they rebalance. Wizards fix Winota, please. But if I have to play against Nadu, give me Winota back. But anyway, uh, I think it's cool to get some of these cards that do things that we probably could do in paper, but it's very hard to do, and it could change the way that you might brew a deck or look at a card, right? And I think that's really cool. I don't want to discount that experience, but at the same time, I like that we have it just in a different way.
yeah, that's certainly interesting.
And I'm
Um,
sure you and I could agree that they just need to stop farting around and give us Pauper on Arena. But I mean, they need to do it.
they,
Why haven't they done
they,
it?
they
Like,
need to put Commander on Arena.
they do.
Because
But
even if
I
you have got a limited card pool, right, you're still getting hundreds of thousands of cards.
I think it would drive so much more traffic to the client.
It
I know they've
really
got to
would.
figure out how to make four people be in one game, but it can't be that hard at the end of the day.
Yeah,
You know, I think it's weird. Arena when it first came out, I never quite understood the appeal of it. Just as someone who's only ever played Magic in person and only ever really played Commander. But I think after I've had the opportunity to draft and play, some standard over time, and I've tried a little bit of Explorer and things like that. Like it's cool to have those formats to try without necessarily having to go on Monday night if I can't go on Monday night, or go on
yeah,
Friday night if I can't go on Friday night. I think it allows a
definitely.
lot of players access to the game that maybe can't have it. It's also on your phone now. That's crazy to me that I can play
Yeah,
Magic on my phone. I know I'm the boomer who's like, I remember when cell phones couldn't access the internet, but like it's the truth. Like it's so cool that we have access to some of that stuff now.
well, on my phone, I'm like, what is this card? Can I? I'm like trying to zoom in, and I'm like, what?
And then you
It's
accidentally
just
click the wrong
yeah.
card and you're like,
Like, come on. And your time's running out, and you're like, oh my
yeah.
gosh, just.
There's
uh,
nothing that's ever made me, I guess, more annoyed and happy to play Magic at the same time than that time bar. Like when it's working in your favor, you love that time bar, and it's the best thing
huh.
that's ever existed. But when you're up against you're up against the wall and you're trying to figure out what play you want, and you see that time bar across the screen, you're like, I know, okay, I know, I'm trying to figure it out. I can't find the line. Just give me some
Yeah,
time.
yeah. I love it when players are just sitting there. Their timer just goes off, and then like they keep going down and down and down. I'm like, I will wait here all day and wait until you forfeit
Yeah.
automatically. Like I'll take that win. I will sit here for 15 minutes if it means I win.
Yeah, I think to me it reinforces a principle that I've always tried to kind of preach to my play group, and I try to hold a standard for myself, which is to plan your turn ahead of time. Don't ever
Mm,
untap on your turn with at least a rudimentary plan of what you're trying to do, right? In every
yeah,
format, you could top deck a card that's going to change your turn, right? That's just the truth of our game, and we love when that happens. But it's like you got to figure out what your plan is if you don't top deck the thing that changes your plan. And if it does, then cool. It makes sense why you may need to take 20 seconds and think about it quick before you change
yeah,
your plan. But it's like, to me, it's like, you should at least have an idea what you want to do, even if you haven't nailed down the specifics of it yet. I always try my best to plan my turn ahead of time and be someone who not speed runs my turns, but like tries to play efficiently. Okay, I kind of have an idea of what I'm going to do. Maybe you get that weird discover, that weird scry that changes your mind, and you have to
yeah,
think things through quick, but like, have an idea what you're trying to do. Because I think the other thing that we don't think about when you think about planning your turn is when you plan this turn, you get the privilege of planning next turn as well, right? Now you're thinking
yeah,
about your strategy long term over the course of 3 or 4 turns instead of just, I guess I'll play this land. Like, I don't know. It's like, I think
yeah,
I've seen some of my friends who are newer players, I've seen the wheels start to turn in their head when they realized, oh, I'm not just planning this turn, I'm planning next turn as well, or I'm planning 2 or 3 turns
yeah,
down the line as well. And it starts to change the way that you view the game when you're looking at multiple turns at once instead of just, do I play this spell or this spell? You know what I
yeah.
mean?
And yeah, I think players should know. It sometimes it's hard, but like a player should know their deck. It's like I've built decks where I'm like, okay, I just threw this together an hour ago. Let's play, and I'm looking at cards. I'm like, I don't remember putting this card in there, and but you should have an idea of where you're going with the deck, and what your goal is, like during the game. And
You're like, this is
sometimes
a
it's
water
hard, but
energy. How did this make it in here? Right? You're
yeah,
like, where did this come from?
what is this?
know?
This is a One Piece card. How did it?
Yeah, like how did this make it?
uh, yeah,
But I
the
think there's a difference, right, between like when you're playing a deck for the first time. I'm not that player who's gonna be at the edge of the table saying, "Come on, man, what are you doing? Like, figure it out." Like, there's a difference
yeah,
between trying a deck for the first time and in a deck you've played 50 times. But I think the difference is as you grow in the game, right, you start to look at your hand and go, what are my options? What makes the most sense to push me forward value wise or on board or what have you? And so, even if you pick a deck up for the first time, in fact, even if you play somebody else's deck or you don't know all the intricacies of their ratios, you can start to at least cobble a plan together to figure out
yeah,
what you want to do. And then as you get right the experience, it kind of falls better into place. But there's a lot of times I forgive new players for it because they don't know what they're looking at. They don't know what
hmm
all these cards do and how they work together. Right? We barely know how all these cards do and how they work
yeah,
together. But it's like as you learn your deck, right? You start to learn your play lines and your tendencies. Then you start to go, okay, I don't necessarily need to know what the top three cards of my deck are because we'll figure it out when we see them and we'll work them into the game plan that we have. And I think that really helped me grow as a player when I was like, okay, I'm a student of the game. I want to learn. I want to see every situation so I can be a better player and learn more and enjoy myself. I enjoy myself by learning, and it's like I want to see those wacky situations where I draw something that stops me in my track and go, how do I spend my 7 mana this turn? I'm not sure, and you have
yeah,
to figure it out. You have to get, but I think it all just comes down to what you want as a player. There are players who just want to put weird things down on the table and see what their opponents want to do with it. We have
yeah,
one of those in our play group. We have players in our play group who want every deck to have a theme, and if it doesn't follow that theme, they're not going to play the card, right? And I love that we all can again just have these experiences as commander players and come together at a table and play together.
yeah. No, I definitely like that. I was gonna say, but I like that we can all have our own niches and fun and all that. I don't know. I don't like when people they'll they'll look at a card and they'll be like, "Why is that in there? That's a stupid card." And you're like, "Well, I don't think it's stupid. I like this card." Like for the longest time, I've got a Sidisi Brood Tyrant deck, and I had the Sultai banner in it. It's just 3 mana taps for Sultai, and you can sacrifice it to draw a card.
Yeah,
Had it in the deck because I was like, "This is thematic. I know it's not.
yeah.
I know it's not the best card, but
Sultai on
I
the
I
card.
like
You
it."
have to play. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's cool, and I don't think players should be focused on 100% uh yeah, like a machine. Like it shouldn't be perfect every single time. Like
Yeah.
this isn't modern. This isn't legacy. Like this is just having fun. Like I mean, if you're in CEDH, go right ahead. That's exactly what the format's for. And I think there needs to be maybe a bigger divide between
Oh,
those.
for sure.
And that brings us in. Yeah, there's all these bans recently, and Wizards taking over. I mean, how do you think that's going to go with the like making that divide even wider?
I honestly thought that we were going to walk into Duskmorn and I was just going to make 4 weeks of content and we were going to get to the end of the year and I was just going to brew more decks and that it was just going to be that was the way that life was. And well, the rules committee and then Wizards decided that that wasn't going to be the case. The ban, two of the four cards didn't shock me. Two of the four cards did.
Yeah, I think everybody was in
Nadu
that
didn't
boat.
shock me. I think most
No.
people looked at Nadu and knew that it was a problem. When you get banned from one of the strongest formats that's the most popular, when you get banned from Modern, you know there's a problem. Modern, a
Yeah.
format that pushes cards to the absolute brink of their existences, you know that you have a problem on your hands. And in fact, I saw that spoiler and went, great, another Simic commander I have to deal with now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just another Simic value commander. Dockside, I just wasn't surprised. Dockside was a card that
Yeah,
we've
that
talked about for years. I think if you
yeah.
if you have yet to play a Dockside, talk to your playgroup and play it once, and I think you'll understand why Dockside can be a problem. It's not inherently a problem, but the problem is it gets shoved into decks that quickly make it a problem. And then it
Yeah.
just becomes more and more of a problem. And then you have the people that figure out how to blink it or loop it, and now you're just off to the races, right?
Yeah.
So I wasn't surprised. I think Crypt and Lotus surprised me a little bit more just because they tend to have more stigma around them. Like most people are not playing Mana Crypt in their deck, right?
No.
Most people don't have a Crypt, they don't own a Crypt. You're only
Or
playing Crypt.
a Lotus. They're like,
You're pushing yourself up there, right, in the power level. Jeweled Lotus, I have actually seen more in some weird off
yeah.
cases because you have a
It's like,
10 mana commander you're trying to play quicker or something like that. And to
yeah.
me, Lotus isn't strictly as bad as Mana Crypt is. Like it's an acceleration piece, but you only get to do it once. Right? Mana
Well,
Crypt's there every
it's once
turn.
it's specifically for your commander, so it's like
Yeah.
you're only going to cast one thing, and if somebody turns my commander into a 1/1 citizen with that enchantment, like Lotus does nothing for me, and
I
and
think
it's one of those cards. It's like turn 1, fantastic. Turn 12, eh.
okay.
Like I don't know.
The other thing that shocked me, I think, a little bit with Lotus was it's I know that it is played in Legacy at the moment in an off case deck, but it is a commander card. At the end of the day, Jeweled Lotus was
Yeah.
designed for commander to be played in commander and to be sold in commander products, right? And so it still shocks me that it was banned. Now, I think at the end of the day, that comes into question, which is the second half of our conversation, which is right. The rules committee made these bans. There was massive backlash, which was
Yeah.
a I hated watching it happen because
It's
at the end of the
awful.
day, a bunch of people made a decision they thought was best, and sometimes it's not the decision that people are going to like. We see this all the time elsewhere in life. This isn't just a magic issue, right? This is a
Yeah.
life issue. And I definitely felt bad for the rules committee, especially with all the hatred they got online, because they didn't deserve that. They're just trying to do their jobs. They're trying to make this format the format they want to see, and they get a lot of odd data. I think the thing that we forget is that Commander isn't modern, where there's games being played all the time, and you have all this data, and there's so many of these deck archetypes and this data out the wazoo for us to take these and understand these decisions. Commander's a wide open format, right? And we don't even know how many people
Yeah.
play it. We don't even know how it's played all the time, right? And so they did the best they could with their information, and you have an entire community of people backlashing at them. And I felt bad for the ones that were more front facing, right? They definitely took the worst of it. But of course, Wizards stepped in. They decided to take control of the format back, and it truly, to me, was the death of EDH and the kind of continuation of Commander, right? Wizards has always called it Commander. Commander's been on the front of all the boxes. Commander's been in the names of all the products. Like to me, it was the death of EDH and it was the reborn of Commander. It's just Commander
Mm.
now to me, right? Because those people that made it EDH are unfortunately not there now. They're still in the community, right? They're still out doing their things, but it's Commander now to Wizards. And I'm very intrigued to see what they're going to do with it. It was the Command Zone just recently that talked about, does Wizards change the ban list? Do they switch it up? Do they take cards off? Do they put new cards on? And that was a very interesting idea. I don't think I had thought about because they kind of can now, right? They get the free
Yeah.
pass because it wasn't their decision, right? So, they kind of have that chance to change it. I'm very intrigued to see if they would. Because let's be honest, I know we don't want to talk about this, but Jewel Lotus sells packs. Some of these cards sell packs, and at the end of the day, they are a business. I know we don't like to talk about that,
Yeah.
but it's the truth at the end of the day. And what scare my question to a lot of my play group was, what scares you more? Them bringing them back or them trying to make better versions of them, which I could see them doing as well, which just scares me.
Yeah.
Seeing some of the cards, right, like Nadu that we've seen recently that have become problems. Which would you rather have, the known quantity or the next Jewel Lotus 2.0 that comes out even better than the first one, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. My thought is that they're going to, now that Wizards has control of it. I think maybe they'll be fair. I mean, they're usually pretty fair with the other formats, but they're also, now that they've got free reign, there's nothing stopping them from just going crazy. Like they've already been cranking up Commander products like crazy, and they're like Modern Horizons 3, and you're like, this
Yeah.
is really for
Oh,
Commander
you mean Commander
players,
Horizons 3.
like
Let's be
Commander
honest.
Horizons
Let's
3.
not call it.
Yeah, and then it's like they keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, which I know they got to do, but I think they've accelerated it so fast in the last 3 years, and now that they've got control of the whole thing, I think it's going to accelerate faster. And all the Yu-Gi-Oh players are like, "Oh, join the club,"
Well, welcome
where
in,
you're
yeah.
like, play one card, boom, your whole deck's out. Like
There's
that's
one
that's
thing
all
that I
Yu-Gi-Oh is now.
there's one thing I want to give Wizards props for because it's very easy in this conversation to just rake them over the coals and just right, and we all get our free punches in. It's great. Everybody's happy, right? That's where we're at right now on the internet. But the one thing I really want to point out for Wizards at the moment is how good their design has been lately of precons. Like the precons have gotten so much better than they used to be, in my opinion. Better reprint
That is
value,
true.
cooler commanders, and commanders that care about just off the wall things or just trying to make things different. Look at the Duskmourn precons. You have four precons that may look similar to commanders that have existed before, but they're trying new things with it. And not only that, but
Yeah,
to me, the mechanics feel better grounded in pre-existing archetypes that have better support than just shooting it out into outer space as its own thing. You look at the Zimone precon, right? A precon that
yeah,
cares about landfall. It does the manifest dread thing, but landfall is still a thing. This is an archetype that has massive support, right? You move over to Amanatu, right? A deck that cares about Miracle, but it ties it to enchantments, a card type that has a ton of support, right? So you kind of see that they're finding this design space, right? I think in a good way. You even look at the Bloombro decks, same thing. You have these tribes, right? But they care about pre-existing things that already exist and have a ton of support. And I think it makes it easier to take these precons and upgrade them than back when they were like, okay, here's 50 cards that care about Blink and 50 cards that care about Flyers. Congratulations, here you go. Like
yeah. I know. I look at. I mean, even with the standard sets too. When I started in, I started Battle for Zendikar,
about
and
the same as myself. That's awesome.
yeah,
That's
nice.
cool.
Yeah, and I have a very soft spot in my heart for that set. I love that set.
Yeah.
But I went back and looked through. I got the original, or I got the dual decks, the Zendikar versus
Yes.
Eldrazi dual deck. That was my first ever Magic set I got, first ever Magic cards I got,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh man, these are so cool back then. And then I recently went back through the deck, and I was like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. This is terrible. And but now they're doing stuff that's all those the dual decks or the starter decks, and then the commander decks. They're actually putting in most of the cards deal with what the commander does, and then they've got the 9 or 10 cards that are just kind of like the you throw them
Yeah.
in because they need to be there. But even like the land bases too, I think of like they're slowly getting a little bit better because they used
I
to
think
just be
I think
terrible.
they're night and day better than what they used to be.
Yeah,
I can't think of a precon off the top of my head over the last three or four sets where I looked at the mana base and thought, what are you doing?
yeah,
Maybe other than and it's not their fault, but like five color decks are just brutal. They're the most brutal mana bases you can
yeah.
design. If you've never built a five color deck, try it because the mana bases can
Yeah.
be brutal to try to
It's
figure out how to
expensive.
even four color decks can be brutal as well without doing
Yeah,
them, like you said, very expensively. But even the five color decks, like the Sliver deck, I didn't think the mana base was top tier, but it was still half decent for what they
yeah,
needed to do for a precon. It was good. And then you start looking at them starting to reprint the check lands more and starting to reprint some of these
yeah,
lands more is really helpful because they're lands that are really, they're not the splashy lands, they're the meat and potatoes lands that are helpful
yeah.
to every deck.
Well, and
I
I
even
like
look
that.
at the dual lands, right, that we just got in Duskmourn, right? They're
Yeah,
effectively check lands, kind of, if you think about it. They're
yeah,
very similar to it, right? Those are the meat and potatoes type lands that we want to see. Yes, they're going to be expensive while they're in standard, but then they'll recede back down and they'll be really good lands for people to have. And those are the lands that I want to see designed, not shock lands. As much as we love shocks and fetches and triumphs, like
hmm,
I want these cool dual lands, like the Innistrad lands, the slow lands. I was like, that's
yeah.
top tier. Those are the lands we want because it's like
Oh
they
yeah,
eventually became cheaper unless you're playing, white black for some reason. But like, they became cheaper, and it's like it's cool to see these lands be under $10 and actually be helpful in your deck, right? And be useful rather than them just making a shock land 2.0,
yeah.
know?
Well, and like you said, I like that they're creating a better design space. Like these common checklands that are like, hey, if you have 13 or less life, it untaps or it
Yeah.
enters untapped. I'm like, that's a cool design space. They should do that more because I think that they're more fair, right? Compared to fetch land, I get a thing and I get the best land in my deck and
Yeah.
I get a tropical island and I slap it down, right? But these are like, okay, I got to jump through like a couple of hoops, but it's not that bad. Like reveal a land from your hand, or do you have two or more basics? Do you have two more opponents? Do you have? I like that space because it brings those dual lands to a place where people can, like you said, afford them, and they can actually, I don't know, make more. It just makes mana bases faster and slower at the same time. So it's like I say, it's more fair, and you're not just cranking stuff out as fast as possible. And it's your resource. Everybody needs land, so why not
Yeah.
give everybody access to these really good cards?
Well, if you look at it, even the floor for those dual lands to me is coming up, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it used to just be just straight up they come in tapped, that's it. You know,
Yeah,
now you have lands that may come in tapped, but they have a rider or they give you
yeah,
some other value. Like to me, that's important, right? I look at things like the Dominaria dual lands that had dual typings. That's a huge thing for some other
yeah,
lands, right? And that's a basic land that some people won't play because it comes in tap, but other people are like,
yeah.
no, no, that's a great way to get those
Oh
lands under
yeah,
my control. And now I have them for other abilities. Like to me, I see the floor of those lands coming up, which is me equally as important as raising the roof. Like it's easy for them just to raise the
yeah,
roof and make more and more wacky lands, but it's like to raise that floor to give people more dual land options. Now if you build a two-color deck, you may only need to play 4 or 5 of each basic if you really want to just play all these duels, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
always have access to your two colors. Like it's cool that you have that option now instead of before it was like, well, there's kind of only like 6 or 7 good dual lands. I guess I might play a couple, value
yeah.
lands, but at the end of the day, I'm just packing this thing with basics, you know?
Or you get the old commander precons, and they're just like, okay, you get the gate, you get this woodland stream, you get the like,
Yeah.
yeah, like I
You
say,
you
all of
might get a
those.
single color utility land if they wanted to print it that time, and then it's just basics,
Yeah,
It's just yeah, and it's funny to me because I've started doing pre-con upgrades more recently, and it's fun to like set yourself a budget as a player who doesn't normally set myself budgets, and like sit down and go realistically, how do I change this deck with $50? Like, if you've never done that as the viewer, pick a pre-con and try it because it's a very interesting mechanic for you to sit down and go, with an unlimited budget, you can make any deck better. But how do I
yeah,
do it with $50 where I have to kind of
mm-hmm.
think about every card individually and not just, oh, I'm playing the Great Henge because it's the best card I can play,
Because
but
it's
oh,
there.
it's $60. Well, there goes that card. Or it's like, oh,
Yeah,
this deck is a counters deck. It wants Innkeeper's Talent. Oh, Innkeeper's Talent's $20, but I really want to spend $20 in Innkeeper's. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's
yeah,
cool to kind of start to crank these wheels and go, wow, cards actually matter. Instead of just, being like, oh, well, I have no budget, so I'm just going to throw in every card I want.
yeah. I feel that this is kind of related. I like that you like for budget decks, you find these cards that are kind of hidden gems,
Yeah.
and you're like, this fits in here, and then maybe you play a game, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the best card that I've played. And you get these hidden gems, and you really kind of latch onto it, and that's how I feel when I play a pre-release. Like I'll play this card that's just so dumb, and it's
Yeah.
not even that good, but in the pre-release, it's really good. And you slap it down in the pre-release, and you're like, I'm gonna win. This is the best feeling. I've got the cool cards, and then you slap it down in Commander, and you're like, eh. But you have that mental connection of, boy, I love this card. Like, how can I make this work? And like you
Yeah.
connect, yeah, like with feeling on all these cards. I
I
think
think
that's
that's
pretty
why,
cool.
to me, I think it makes you a better Magic player if you play more than one format. Because you're
Yeah.
right. There's a lot of commons and uncommons that will never see the light of day in a commander deck. But I think it is really cool that as over the last couple sets, we're seeing uncommons and commons actually get a lot better, right? And become cards you
Hmm.
want to see in a commander deck. But I think that's what I love so much about playing a format like draft, is that
Yeah.
those commons become more key and you start to read into those cards more and care about them more, other than when you buy your bundle of the latest set and all you're looking for is the bomb rares, right? You
Yeah.
you go through those commons and you don't care. But to me, it's like when you start to care about those commons, like the one thing I think we don't talk about enough is how awesome magic art is. And every single one of those common has killer art that you're just not paying attention to because you just don't care
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. No, that's why like with the whole popper thing, I love the commons. That's where I've lived because like I don't have all the money in the world. I can't go out and buy all these expensive cards. So like I try to find stuff in my bulk bins that I can utilize. That's why yeah, playing Pauper Commander is it's so different because it's still the 100 cards singleton with the commander that's any uncommon, which is awesome, which adds so much variety
So
to
that's
the
wild in
game.
itself. Like off the rip, that's
Oh
wild.
yeah.
Because you're breaking down most of the limitations of Commander, which is it has to be a
Hmm.
legendary creature, right? Like that's at
Yeah.
least putting you down to a certain field. But the idea that it's any uncommon, right, and then the rest of your deck is commons, right?
Yep.
That's crazy to me. I honestly might want to start messing with that because that's just the idea of that. It just blows my mind.
That's really cool. Well, like I might have um, Chandra Spitfire, where it's just whenever a non-creature spell you control deals damage, it gets plus X plus O, where X is the amount of damage, or
Yeah,
however it's worded. And so you're making this Voltron commander with all these little dumb ping spells, and then you're
yeah.
swinging in with this flying red creature, and like
And you
that's
have a
it's like different strategies. It's you just
and you
never
have a
think about.
briefcase of red commons that deal damage. Like there's
Yeah,
four in every set. So you've got
yeah,
just well, my thought with the commons is like, your average creature is a lot more impactful when all you're playing is commons, right?
yeah,
You know, like when you're playing an actual commander game, you're generally not playing nonchalant creatures. Every creature in your deck normally has a role and it's there for a reason, right?
yeah,
Whereas I feel like when you put yourself down at that level and you're restricting your card base, right? Every single creature in your deck becomes important, even if it's just being a beater, or if it's just as a blocker, or it's just as a wall. Like, you're approaching the whole game completely differently. You don't have this top tier 3 mana removal that's going to nuke anything you want out of the sky. You're playing a lot more 4 5 mana single target removal that isn't that
mm-hmm,
efficient. And I think to me, it probably just completely breaks the game wide open. It's the thing I always liked about Pauper. Every time I've watched Pauper being played, is that it still has some heat to it. There are commons that are really good and they do a really good job of
yeah,
interacting with each other. But the windows of opportunity and the way that you approach value has to change when you understand what you have access to in the format. You may not
yeah,
have Anguished Unmaking, you may not have Assassin's Trophy, you may not have Swords to Plowshares, but you do have other efficient counterspells and efficient removal, even for being commons. It's cool to see that ecosystem change when you push
yeah,
yourself down.
yeah. When I always think of there's these cards that you will never ever see in Commander, but in Pauper Commander you could possibly see them. They've printed a handful of them. There's these green creatures. I guess that's all the colors, but specifically this one green creature that has an activated ability that costs 8, and it's
Yeah.
like your creatures get plus one and trample, and like that's it, and it costs 8 mana. And you're like, I would never play that in Commander because I can do that for 5 mana or less, and but in Pauper you're like, that's a really cool effect. It's harder to get like once I get all these big creatures out, I plop that down and I pay the mana, and I'm
Yeah.
suddenly you're swinging in with all these things, and you only have 30 life in Pauper Commander too, so it's like you're trying to push through. It's a little bit slower, so you really have you got a little bit more time to like sit back and enjoy your deck instead of just going.
Yeah, I think the time really helps. I think it also helps because it's like you see the pitfalls of your strategy or you see the turn by turn value more clearly, right?
Yeah,
The problem with commanders, you tend to start generating value and you're off. There's no getting up through the gears. It's just, you're like one of these modern Teslas that just literally takes off and there's no stopping. Once you get
yeah,
go, you go. And there's no stopping, otherwise you're dead, right? And it's just interesting. You play these other formats like draft and limited, where it's kind of like Pauper, right? Where you really got to grind up those gears. You got to kind of build up, and you start to see kind of the beauty of some of the things of Magic that we just don't get to see in Commander because
yeah,
it's there, but instead of taking 3 turns to make that value play, you're taking half a turn to do that, and you're stacking it on top of other things, you know. Um,
Yeah. Well,
it's
it's
insane to me. I played a commander game this week where with Jetmir, where I was at 9 creatures on turn 4. And
right.
I
Yeah.
sat back and went, holy crap, what happened? And you look
Yeah.
back and you realize, oh, I went this bomb mythic that does this into this rare that all made tokens, and now I'm sitting here on turn 4 with a perfect mana and a knockout on at least one player at the table, and you just go, this is commander. Like this is just what
Yeah.
commander is if you want it. But commander can also be every card in my deck is a cat, and I just want to play cats. And it's just, it's just
Yeah.
sometimes it's easy to demonize a format because of X thing. But you realize, just like you
Hmm.
talked about with Pauper, that there's also beauty in every format, that you have these other ways that you can approach things. And I think that's what makes us also cool as Magic players, is that we can find what we love in any one thing or any one format, instead of feeling like, well, if you don't play Commander, then you don't play Magic, or if you don't play X, then you don't play Magic, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I agree. It's it's hard to describe like how much, I don't know, just how much time and energy and fun I've had with this. I've put in and had with this format. Um, like I said, just even just brewing decks, and I've brewed so many decks over the course of 10 years, and it's just so fun, and your decks constantly evolve, and sometimes you're like, oh, I don't like this deck anymore. I've changed as a person, and it's just less fun to me now. Or so you tear it apart and you build a different one, and all of a sudden it's kind of the same, but it's a little bit new, and so it's more fun again. And yeah, there's just so much about it that is just exciting constantly. More so, well, personally, more so for me than some of those other 60 card formats where it's like you have a structure, right? You like, these are the meta decks. If you don't play those, you're probably going to lose. Like I personally don't like that. I don't care if somebody else likes that. I think it's fine. I like those formats, but I would rather have the freedom that Commander offers.
Yeah, and I think it's cool. I think this conversation is definitely going to get me to think about Pauper Commander probably more than I ever actually have, because I think it's at least something I want to take a shot at, because who knows what I can learn from it. At the end of the day, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I try my best to be a student of the game and want to learn, because I think that everything can teach you something new. And it could be a lesson you learn and take to another format and do something completely different because you saw one thing and you saw the world differently.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it's really fun that there's a world where the two of us who focus on completely different content and make different things can, whether you want to call it commiserating or celebrating together about the game that we love,
Yeah,
and all these things
yeah,
that we love about these formats, and we can find these things in each other's formats instead of just saying, oh, well, you don't play X, so whatever, like
yeah.
I, because I think if you just look at the internet, it's easy to believe that our game is that way, that it's just a bunch of people
Mm-hmm.
beating each other up for not playing X card and Y deck, because that
Yeah,
certainly seems to be what the internet is these days. I was
for
going to
sure.
tell you, I think one of my favorite parts of spoiler season of every new set, it isn't when the bomb mythics come out that everybody cares about and everybody goes, lol, this is going to break this deck. It's on like those last 3 days where you're getting all the commons and uncommons, and you see all the pauper players come out and they're like, this common is exactly what I've been looking for this deck. And you start
For
doing the
12
research and you're like,
years.
this is so cool. Like, what I mean? Like, we're
Yeah,
all focused about these super dumb $20 rares that we're all gonna, go bananas about. But you have a whole group of people that wants this 5 cent common that is gonna be easy to find. You're probably not worried about getting one. And it's like, that's so
yeah.
cool to me that we all can eat off the same plate and all have our interests
It's great.
without stepping on each other's toes or not having room for each other.
Yeah, I actually, hold on. I've got a card I want to show you. It's like for the popper format. Hold on, I'll elaborate here in a second. It's right
Go
here.
for it. I can't wait to see it.
Oh, here it is. Found it. I knew it was one of those decks. All right, this card. There's actually two cards right here. So I'm pretty sure it's for popper. It's called Foxfire. Now, Foxfire. Oh, let me pull it up.
What a card. Love
Foxfire.
that art. That is beautiful.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's super cool. So it is, yeah, so it's legal in Pauper. Untapped target, it's an instant. I'll put it up on screen for the for the thing.
Yeah, I've got it here
But
at Skyfall, but yeah, read it
yeah,
off
so
for us.
yeah, untapped target attacking creature. That creature just doesn't deal combat damage. Um or yeah, neither deals nor receives combat damage this turn. And then you draw a card at the beginning of the next turn. That's a single creature, basically removal for the turn. It's a worse fog. It's because it just prevents the one thing. In Pauper Commander, that might actually be pretty viable because there's usually one or two big threats on the board, and if you can remove the one, that's great. And then you draw a card at the beginning of next turn. You're immediately getting card advantage, and you're removing some big thing. And I'm sure that can play in a way in some commander deck. Same with Foreshadow. This one is from Visions. It says it does the same thing. Draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, and it says name a card. Put the top card from target opponent's library into their graveyard. So they mill one. If that card isn't, if that is the named card, you draw a card. So if you build your deck around looking at the top
Opponent's
card
top
of other
card.
people's decks, all of a sudden, like you can get a little bit of card advantage off of this for 2 mana. You're getting 2 cards for 2 mana, which is actually pretty good. So and like these common cards that I've just had, they make me think so hard about all this stuff. Sorry, I might have derailed the whole thing, but it's
No,
all very
what's funny
cool.
is this is just literally what proves why our game is so much fun. You have a
Yeah,
card that was last printed in what, fifth edition in Foxfire that
yeah,
sure by
it's
modern
old.
Magic standards this could probably be a single green mana and still be very playable, in
Yeah,
modern Magic. Like I read Foxfire and I was like, sure, okay, your opponent attacks you with a big creature and you get to block that damage. But my first thought was, what if you have to attack with a creature to get an effect and you have to put it in harm's way? Here's a way to literally
mm-hmm.
protect your creature, pull it out of combat. It still triggers its attack trigger. It
Yeah,
still does things that you need to do, and you get a card for it for 3 mana. That's not terrible. That's effectively giving a
yeah,
creature an indestructible, right? Or something like that, which is an effect you'd pay 1 or 2 mana for. And then
yeah,
foreshadow, like I can think of at least a commander or two where you're trying to manipulate what your opponents, or you get to look at everybody's top card, or you want cards off of a player's deck. This is
yeah,
a very interesting card. At only what Scryfall claims that foreshadows 20 cents, which I probably
yeah,
believe, if not less than that. I mean,
definitely.
that's probably a piece of tech that you're going to play at a table that no one's going to have seen that card before.
Mm-hmm.
And with
Yeah,
just
that's
one printing in Visions, I mean, I haven't seen this card before, and I would imagine most people probably haven't either.
yeah. Well, that's why I just love this stuff too because I pull out all these cards and set them aside for I'm like okay this will be good in Pauper or Commander. I set them aside and I love the old cantrip cards because you're not immediately getting the value, but your next turn you get 2 cards at the beginning of your turn, so all of a sudden you've got a couple turns down, and you compare these cantrip cards with like Ponder or uh, whatever those other ones are for
Yeah.
like the Amanatu Miracle deck. Now you're if you have to put something if you have 2 cards you really want, you got the cantrip trigger, and now you've put those cards 1 and 2. You can miracle off both of those for Amanatu. That's like I don't know. I love looking through these old cards and realizing, oh, these are actually pretty cool. Like I can play with these.
Or like with foreshadowing, if somebody just scryed, right, and they
Yeah,
kept a card on top, you can burn the card that was on top, right? There's
yeah,
there's a shutdown aspect of it too. Let me give you an example back of a common that I didn't know existed until this week when I used it in a brew. So we'll feed
yeah.
off each other here. It's a card from Invasion called Mourning. This is a black aura. It's one in a black for an aura that says you enchant creature. The enchant creature gets -2, -0, and for a black, you can return Mourning back to your hand. The deck I put this in was a new commander from Dustborn called Victor Valgaboth Seneschal. This is a commander that cares about enchantments coming in, and you get one effect for each of the first 3 times that an enchantment comes in during your turn. Well, here's an enchantment that you could play, pay a mana to bounce back to your hand, and then play again, effectively, right? Giving you
Yeah.
multiple triggers of these enchantments coming in. If you, as the viewer, aren't aware of most enchantment decks, you have abilities that care about you playing enchantments or enchantments coming in, meaning it's not just Victor that's triggering off this. You're triggering your whole board of enchantment
Yeah.
effects for 3 mana, right?
Well, and
Here's
in
an example of a common that's probably not very good to most people's standards, but for 3 mana, I'm triggering a whole board of things, and I, with enough mana, can do this multiple times, right? And now you have this
yeah.
whole board going up in a commander deck. This isn't, some janky, I just threw cards that were in my box together and I'm building a commander deck. This is a deck that's playing top tier removal, playing $15 enchantments, but a $20, 20 cent invasion card is just as good as some of the other enchantments in
Yeah.
that deck for what it can do for that commander. You know what I mean? And that's just cool. It just goes to show you that like these old cards are out here, even if you don't realize they're out there. It's the I'll plug it. I don't care. It's why Scryfall is such a cool tool because you can go in
Yeah.
and search for some of these cards that you have no idea that ever
Oh
existed.
yeah. I love them. Well, and that one too, morning for Ariette, the
Yep.
Esper deck, right? It's like if their creature's enchanted, they can't attack or block. But then it's like, okay, I really need to move this to a different creature, and then that's like 3 mana, and that's it. And then they can't attack or block. It's just getting back plus triggering all the Enchantress deck
And remember
effects.
that returns instant speed. That's not a sorcery speed return. So let's
Yeah.
say your opponent's creature is going to die with the morning that's on it. Bounce it back to your hand. Now you've
Yep.
got it to play again. The reason that I knew or I was looking for morning was because I was playing or I was looking for what is it? Flickering Ward. It's a very
Yeah.
similar style of an enchantment, but it's in white and it's worth about
hmm
600 times what morning is because it's in white and not in black. So
Well, it's worth
flickering
300
ward,
times more too.
yeah. So flickering ward's a $4 or $5 card because it's in the more popular enchantment color. But I knew
hmm
flickering ward existed because I have a Sithis deck where you're just trying to machine out
Yeah.
enchantments, right? Particularly for as cheaply as possible to get those triggers, right? So here's an example of a card just being in kind of the wrong color and being there. You just didn't know it was there because you never looked for it, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that's really cool that this idea of a card exists in another color. I think there's one of these in all colors, right? Because you have like Shimmering Wings
Yeah.
that's in blue, but like because it's not in the enchantment colors, green and
It's
white
yeah.
are normally your enchantment colors. You're talking about 10 cents versus, $5. But it was just cool in that head when I was like, are there more cards like this? Because I knew of the green one and I knew of the white one. I was like, there's got to be a black one, right? And I went looking for it and I was like, there is. How do I not know about this? And then I found another white one and I was like, this is so cool that I'm just like finding these random old cards that I just never knew about for this
Yeah.
deck that you never would have thought about if you're just clicking on EDHREC and taking the top 60 cards, that exist for a deck and moving on, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Well, and still going on with that. So I just built I guess it was a little bit ago, but uh, a black and white vampire popper commander deck.
Okay.
That's on the channel, and I was going through and trying to build it, and commander you got to have your like 10 ramp and 10 card draw or however many you're putting in, like at least that many. And in popper, you just don't have that many options. So you just
No.
have to put something in. And it's going to be terrible and it's fine because like that's what you have access to. So I'll go to Scryfall and I'll look up all these cards that are like here's another one, Blessed Wine. Bet you never heard of Blessed Wine. It's an instant that costs one and a white. You gain 1 life and then you can't trip. Is that good?
What a value
No,
engine,
that's
right?
that's 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 pretty terrible. But in the deck it's in for commander or popper commander, it's
That's two
what's
mana
the
well
commander's
spent.
name? Yeah, but yeah, because it's every time you gain life, your opponents lose 1 life or
Yeah, I
whatever
mean,
it is.
that's the vampire thing, right? Vampires
Yeah,
in Commander, especially in black white, care about that life gain, right? They care about that kind of I'm gonna gain life and you lose life. What's funny is this isn't Sign in Blood, right? This isn't those top
mm-hmm.
tier black draw spells, but you could almost actually argue that it's better for your deck because you're getting that trigger and there's other
Yep,
vampires that care about that too. you're gaining life, which could trigger other things, right? There's so many branches
Yep.
that this card goes down more than just, oh, well, I paid 2 mana and I lost two and draw two. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, like it's and yeah, and this is at instant speed as well. So it says the
True.
next turn's upkeep, which means you could play this on somebody's end step, and then on on player three's turn, and then player four's
You're
turn,
drawing a card.
you're drawing a card, and it's not even your turn. So you're still you're still netting something, and all these cards are fascinating, and it really I like that you said playing other formats and broadening your scopes really helps you to be able to play.
Because to me, I think it's so easy to just look at a commander and go, okay, well, I got to put these X cards in because I'm in this color, and you
Mm-hmm.
lose that room to make the deck your own, right? When you're focused on
Yeah,
putting X staple cards in or S and that, and that's the fun of cards like this is like you'd never go looking for it if you didn't either one have a commander that made you want to go look for it, in my example, or in your example, a format that forces you to go look for them, and I think that's so
yeah,
cool, and I think it's something that Pauper does a really good job at that commander we kind of get away with not having to, right? We kind of
yeah.
have our set pre-designed cards you play if you're looking for a certain effect in a certain color. I kind of wish we didn't have that some days because I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it would just force us to try new things. And I think too often as commander players we just default to that option already instead
Yeah.
of going and looking.
Well, yeah, and there's like I said, there's actually a card called Nick's Lotus and I when I had him on the channel, we found a card. This card, so you remember Explosive Vegetation, right? 4 mana,
Yes.
search for two basics into play tapped.
Yeah.
Terramorph says it's 4 mana, so three and a
I
green.
love this on the name alone. Let's
Yeah,
go.
well the art is amazing too. You would probably never play this, or you would never see anybody play this because it's just kind of it's the payoff isn't as good. But you search your library for basic land onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. So it's untapped first off, but you only get one land for 4 mana. But then it rebounds, and then you can like have at it with the rebound. And so
Yeah.
we saw this card, and we're like, "Wait, what? This is like a explosive vegetation, like fast and slow version because you get lands untapped, but it's the same amount, but you have to wait a turn. So it's like a weird card, but it could fit in a lot of decks. Like whenever you play spells from exile, that kind of
Yeah, I was gonna
stuff.
say the rebound makes this card way better than it would be if it just stopped before it said rebound. Like if it just stopped
Yeah.
before it said rebound, I'd say this is a common and probably playable in formats that care about commons. But the fact that it has rebound makes this, I think, a lot
Hmm.
better than people might think on first read.
Yeah.
Because there's decks that care about playing things from exile, and you'd happily pay 4 mana to guarantee you get a spell from exile.
Oh
Because
yeah.
think about it. That spell from exile could be damage, it could be tokens, it could be more card draw, it could be a
Hmm.
myriad of other things. And yeah, I mean, I probably seen this card because I did open up some Modern Horizons 2, and I definitely opened up Baldur's Gate. So I'm surprised that I don't
Yeah.
recognize the card. But yeah, I mean, obviously you're right. It's not explosive vegetation. It's not the 4 mana ramp spells that you think of. But here's a perfect example of a toolbox ramp spell that in the right
Hmm.
decks may outperform explosive vegetation, right? Because of what you can do on the back end with it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's if you scroll down, it's like 6 cents.
Yeah, eight
And
cents
like
probably tops.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think I think a lot of players get in the weeds on, oh man, Magic is so expensive. I got to do X, Y, Z, and I got to spend $20 on all this stuff. I'm like, you don't really just look through your bulk and kind of figure out what works well, and then you can still build a deck from that.
Well, because think about it. When you think about green ramp spells, right? You're going Rampant Growth, Cultivate, Kadama's Reach, Nature's Lore, Three Visits. You're
Yep.
going through all the $2 ramp spells
Yep.
plus, and you're not thinking about Explore or even getting into the $1 ones. And now we're into the
Hmm.
50-cent ones or the 10-cent ones. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah, it reminds me of a card. I mean, it's not a slam dunk by any means, but it's a card that that's what makes me think of as a card like Nissa's Triumph. This is a random sorcery from War of the
It's like
Spark.
green green if you control Nissa
Yeah, it says
or
search your
that
library
one.
for the two basic forest cards. If you control a Nissa Planeswalker, search for three instead, but you reveal them and put into your hand. Here's a 2 mana spell that brings the forest to your hand. So if you care about playing multiple lands a turn, well, there you go. You could do it that way. Obviously, not a top tier ramp spell. Maybe if you have enough Nissas in your deck, it could be a, worth the
Yeah,
inclusion. But it's like, here's a perfect example of dirt cheap card. Easy, probably easy to find. I mean, War of the Spark was a while ago, so people probably don't have them laying around.
yeah,
But here's an example of, I mean, I look at this card and I'm like, well, if you're trying to play multiple lands a turn, this sets you up for another turn to play more force. If you're playing something like a Zusa, right, where you're just trying to dump force onto the battlefield,
yeah.
here's an example of a card that can do that. But at the end of the day, this could be a perfectly great ramp spell for 10 cents because you're getting the force and you're able to play them right on a future turn.
hmm Well, and it's like if you want to build that Nissa Super Friends deck or that mono green Super Friends, like that's a pretty darn good card. I had this one in an
Listen,
Oathbreaker deck.
I've said
It's
it
like,
before and I'll say it again. We didn't deserve Frog Nissa, but I'm here for it. I love that printing, that new printing of Nissa that's a frog. I love it so much.
that's pretty great.
I for those I've just always liked Nissa Who Shakes the World. It's a green planeswalker that's really
Yeah,
useful in green decks if you're trying to ramp, especially if you're in mono green, right? Because you're gonna have a ton of forest laying around. Isn't it interesting that the less colors that you use, the more basic lands you play? Like there's probably a lesson there. But anyway,
yeah,
um, it's a card that I was using in my main mono green deck anyway. And when I saw that printing, I was like, yep, immediately bought it. I was like, this is so cool.
oh yeah. Well, we
And
could go
it
off this, but I
dropped
do. Oh yeah, I was gonna say we could go off this
a
searching
weekend
for cards
for a long
topic,
time, I'm
but
sure.
one more I wanted to. I don't know if you've seen this card, Land Grant. This is a 2 mana
Land grant.
sorcery. If you have no land cards in hand, you may reveal your hand rather than pay the spell's mana cost. Search
That's
your library for
wild.
forest into your hand, and it's any forest, and straight to your hand. And if you don't have a hand, you don't reveal anything, and you just do this for
That is
free.
so cool.
Or you
That's
just like
wild.
turn one, you're like, here's my hand, everybody. You're gonna forget what I have, and then I'm gonna go search for a forest.
And before there's that one guy with a pad at the table. No, yeah.
Yeah,
No, this is great. Like, to be honest, even in Commander, this it may have some downside in that you're showing your opponents your hand, but like,
yeah,
let's be honest, you draw so many cards in Commander that people are
yeah.
gonna forget what you have in your hand.
hmm
Um, and even if they do know the four cards that are in your hand, it's very tough to play around known quantities, even if you know what they are, you know?
Yeah,
It's just tough, especially when you're dealing with two other players. Like it's just it could be this. I think the best part about this card is it's not a basic forest. The fact that this isn't a basic forest propels this card upward because you can get your triumphs, you can get your dual lands, you can get the things
yep.
that matter. This may not even be a terrible card in a 3 or 4 color deck if you're trying to do it on a budget. This is a
Oh
way to go
yeah,
get one of those cheap duels to get you that last color that you need, right? To get you into
yeah,
some of your other spells. Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Gosh, I love
Cool,
this
cool
game.
stuff.
I love
Yeah,
this game some days where you
it's
just
so
get to
fun.
you get to find these random cards and you're like, who the heck found this card? Who comes up with this? Like who in any situation comes back and finds these things? And I love it. This is, I
Yeah,
think, why I enjoy brewing so much, is it's like, yeah, you have the decks where you only get to play the flashy cards and that's all you put in, but that you get to find these random cards and you're like, this is so cool. I love this. I love that I get to show off this random card that has an old border because it's never been printed in a modern border. And it's cool to me. Obviously now, right, we're reprinting cards with old borders because it's cool, but
yeah. Well, I think you answered that. Uh, my next question was why do we keep coming back to this game? And is it I for me, I'm like I really wanted to. I really looked at my life like 5 years ago or 4 years ago, 3 years ago. Whenever I started the channel, I was like, all I want to do is play Magic. This is the only thing I have ever done that I haven't lost interest in a few
yeah.
months. And I keep coming back to it because it's to me it's the best game ever made. There's so much that goes into it. I can do something new literally every time I play. The same deck you have never plays the same twice. It's just infinite amounts of fun.
And hey, there's more spoilers next week. So we get to do this all over again?
Yeah,
No.
look at that.
No, it's the truth. I mean, I think what's cool is even though I mainly play one format, I have 8 or 9 decks, and you're right, they play different every time, and you get to craft those experiences to what you want. And to me, what also helps is playing with people that you want to play with, playing with the
Hmm.
people that you enjoy playing with, because I think it makes the game even better. There was a period of my
Yeah,
life where I was forced to only play with random people at a card shop. And I'll say that although I had fun, I did not have as much fun as when I got to play with a group of
yeah,
people that I normally get to play with. And it's just different. Even if the game gets heated, even if you have a disagreement, you still enjoy yourself because you enjoy being with those people. And I said it on the podcast pretty recently with Mikey, and I'll reply, and I'll say it again here is a lot of us Magic players are privileged that we have people that we get the ability to play with all the time, and we need to not take advantage of it. Remind ourselves that
yeah,
we are really blessed that we have people we can play with. And not only that, but there are tools now like Spell Table where you can go play with people even in just your desk or your kitchen table or wherever you're setting up. Because 10 years ago, you wouldn't have had that option. You'd be forced to go to an LGS. And I know people who don't have an LGS within 20 miles of their house. So it just comes to show you that there's so many more opportunities now to play the game that we didn't have, right? When you and I both started playing in BFC, if you barely even had the internet to tell you about new things, let alone,
yeah,
to play games. So it's even weird to me to see that Magic has excelled and has kept going, and that the game is
yeah,
going to keep going. And that maybe my hope is that someday I get to teach my daughter how to play this game or to help, her see why I enjoy this game. Yeah, I might be the
yeah,
weird old guy sitting in his recliner talking about, something that nobody understands, right? But it's cool to me that the interests that we have, they teach us to be better. We want to be better. We want to learn instead of just wasting away, to
yeah,
nothing.
yeah. Um, yeah, I agree. I You just made me think of another card, but we can
Oh
you can
gosh.
look that up on your own time. But it's
Like the video for the extended version where we do this for 3 more hours. Don't skip.
we probably
Because
could.
we could.
Um,
I'm sure we could.
uh, it's a card called Old Fogey.
Yes,
It's
that's just us now. It's
it's
just the truth.
it's an uncard, but it's really funny. It's like, well, back in my day. Uh,
Back in my day, you had to actually pay mana for spells. It was crazy. Yeah,
oh man.
it's funny because I feel like every set, I feel like there can't be something new that blows my mind and like makes me look at the game a different way, and I'm proven wrong every time, and I love it.
Yeah.
You know what? I hope that I never fall in love out of love with it. I hope that it never doesn't interest me. But I've had friends who even they have fallen out of love with it. And I'm like, it would take more than just 1 or 2 times sitting down to play where I fall out of love with it because there's so much that I'm not touching. We
Yeah.
talk about how we play the game, and we only play 1 or 2 of the 20 or so formats that exist. Think about if we picked up another format, right? There's probably so much more magic out
Yeah.
there.
It really is. Um, I just lost it. I was looking over here and it's gone. It's
You were
gone now.
digressing about the
Yep.
beauty of this game and about all the things that we love, and then you just turned and lost it. Like,
Like,
no,
yep, now it's gone. It's good because
it's
I'm
it's all gone.
reminiscing. I'm reminiscing now. I'm
About that one time when you top decked that one card and won the game. We all get it. We've all
yeah.
been there. We all love it.
Yep. Yep. Oh yeah, it's good stuff. Um, but anyway, yeah. I guess as we wrap up here, I guess you guys could write in the comments what you guys might want to see more of. Do you like these podcast type episodes? Do you like um, maybe we could do um, maybe we could do a different like a brew together, or we could do
Oh yeah, that'd be fun.
like
I want to brew a.
commander
I've got a
match.
video idea
Yeah,
for you. I've got a video idea
yeah,
for you right here, right now, live.
yeah,
We should brew my first Pauper Commander deck together because I've
yeah.
never done it, and I'd be willing to wait if you wanted to do it for content because I think it'd
Let's
be a
do it.
ton of fun to do.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, let's
I'm gonna
talk about
come in like a
availability.
complete Bambi. You're gonna be able to show me all these commons I've never seen before. It's gonna be wild. It's gonna be wild.
That'll be fun. Yeah, we can make a whole day of it. Um,
I don't
maybe
know about
not
a
that
whole
long,
day, but
but
we
yeah,
can
maybe
knock out a
not.
few episodes.
um,
With the modern
well,
internet, it probably
yeah,
won't take that long, but I mean, it
probably
could.
not. Uh, well, be thinking about which uncommon card you want to play with.
Gosh,
I will
like a
warn, monocolored creatures in Pauper are pretty hard to do. So
rude.
you got to pick two or
Yeah.
more. Well, I guess there are very few three color uncommons, none in four color, and one in five color that you
All
could do.
this makes me
So
want to do, to be 100% honest, is find an archetype that I really love in Commander and try to find a popper uncommon commander for it so that we can see the just like the difference, right? Like, I think it'd be easy just to pick a random meme uncommon, but like generally for me, like I'd want to pick something that at least has some sort of correlation to a normal commander deck because I think it'd be a good juxtaposition of how the formats are different, right?
yeah,
Like I'm sure the first thing that comes to mind, and obviously we can nail one down before we do the videos, try to find like a Selesnya uncommon that cares about enchantments. I can think of it at least two or three off the top of my head, but like that would be a good juxtaposition to something like Calyx or Sithis in
yeah,
regular Commander and how those value engines are different.
yeah. Far less value, but far more heart.
That's true. That's true, man.
um,
I appreciate you having me
yeah.
on. I
No,
think
this is
this is really
great. This is
fun.
fun.
The viewers don't know how many time and emails went back and forth just trying for us to just think of something and making it
Yeah,
happen. But I'm stoked that we did. I love talking about this game, and thankfully my daughter's asleep right now, so I have all the time in the world to do it.
yeah,
uh, I'm so stoked that we finally had a chance to do this, to sit down, and the line is always open, man. I'd love to do more content in the future.
yeah,
Because at the end of the day, we're both just making content, so why not make some together?
yeah.
You know?
No, that's fun. No, yeah. Thank you so much, and yeah, I'm so glad we got put in a call together randomly one day, and we
A
just kind of
random
connected,
group
and
together.
yeah, it's been great. So yeah, thanks for being on, and yeah, I guess we'll catch everybody next week. Well, first off, go
Next
subscribe to
next
Hometown
week. I
Commander.
don't know about next week, but
Sorry, I just started my outro, but
we
yeah,
just birthed a podcast right now.
yeah. Well, I would say I'll catch you next week for your weekly dose of magic. Right, that's my outro, and I
Yes.
started that, but I don't want you to do that yet. I want you to go subscribe to Hometown Commander, and he makes really cool videos. Like you said, he's brewing constantly. There's so many cool decks on there, and there's a lot of cool ideas, and it's always good to have somebody else's perspective and how they brew. So check out that. Make sure I actually have a big live event coming up. I would like you to join Millsy if you could. November 2nd. It's gonna be a big thing. Um, but yeah, we could talk about that here in a second. But anyway,
Yeah, shoot me the
do you have
details.
anything else to say before we end?
If you're still here at the end of this video, thank you so much for listening. I mean, at the end of the day, I know that everyone's time is valuable, and that you decided to listen to us yap at each other is a privilege for both of us. We both
Yes, very
appreciate
much
that.
so.
Like I said at the beginning, I'll repeat here at the end. My channel is just about brewing decks. That's what I do. It's what I love. And my hope is that if that's something that interests you, I may have covered your commander. And if I haven't, come find me on a video and put it in the comments. And I'd love to cover your commander because that's what I'm all about, is brewing decks. And some days it's the only constant in my life. So I wish, you know what I mean? That's the
Yeah,
truth of the way as both parents and adults, right? Sometimes you just don't have a lot of constants in your life. But thank you so
yeah,
much, man, for having me on. I've had a lot of fun since we started chatting about
yes,
checking out your channel as well and learning about another format. It's really cool when like we've said before, we get to eat in our different circles and share with each other. It's really cool, just to see more content and learn more about these cards. And look, I learned about 5 new cards in this time we had recording that I didn't
yeah,
know about before. That's pretty beautiful as well.
yeah, yeah. No, thank you so much for joining me. Yeah, yeah, we'll definitely stay in touch. But yeah, thank you everybody for joining. Again, make sure you like and subscribe and join us next week for your weekly dose of magic.